America, home of free hate speech and land of Donald Trump. Now, although I would love to debate all of the Americans presumably watching this video in the comments section, because I'm not allowed to present an opinion on YouTube, and I'm not allowed to talk about politics in this modern, very sensitive world, I will not be talking about politics today. I'll be talking about something equally outrageous, which is Lewis Hamilton's contract and why he hasn't got one yet. As I think everybody knows who watches Technical F1, I have many controversial opinions. And so when I say that Lewis Hamilton not getting his $50 million contract that he asked for is pretty crazy, I know every single one of you is either slapping yourself in the face or considering jumping off a bridge when I say that. But let me reiterate what's happened so far so I can explain to you why I believe he does deserve that massive £50 million contract. Now, going back to the summer, Lewis Hamilton didn't have a contract, and people were asking him, actually, even in TV interviews, Lewis, what's going to stop you? What's going on this year with your contract? And he said, nothing's happening. It's just been a crazy year, and the contract's taking a bit longer than usual. Now, Toto Wolff didn't have a contract at this point, so we were all wondering, was the Lewis-Toto combination going to go to Aston Martin because Toto Wolff has shares in Aston Martin? But we found out quite quickly that was not the case, because Toto Wolff released a statement along with Mercedes saying that the only reason he had bought those was because he was friends with the team owner, Lawrence Stroll. Alright, Toto. But going back to the reason that he hadn't signed yet, he simply said that it was taking a little while. So his excuse was in line with Lewis's and it all made sense. But then, come November, Toto Wolff released that he had signed a new contract with Mercedes, and everybody was wondering, well, how many more milliseconds will it be when Lewis Hamilton releases his Twitter message saying, #blessed, I'm staying with Mercedes-AMG F1 Petronas F1 team. I know, super long. But when was he going to say that? When was he going to say, yep, I'm staying with Mercedes, that's that? But the more important thing was actually, when was he going to say, yep, I'm staying in F1? Because at the moment, he has no contract, and we have no guarantee that he's staying in F1, and that is the more problematic thing for his career. And people are saying, really? He is a 7-time world champion. He's matched Michael Schumacher's numbers. What does he have to fear? Well, mainly money. He is currently paid $48 million a year. And like any normal person, when you do a good job at your job, you ask for a raise. And because he beat all of Michael Schumacher's statistical records, it seemed obvious that the next step would be simply to ask for a raise. And a £2 million British pound raise really isn't that absurd. So, what happened? Well, the first thing that happened was we need to look back at Mercedes. The pandemic has hit pretty much every single major car manufacturer really, really hard this year, and especially luxury car makers like Mercedes. And although some people venture say that Mercedes isn't a luxury car maker anymore, when you look at their main, most high-profiting models, it's actually some of the luxury cars, because it doesn't cost as much as you think to build some of those cars. And although you're saying, ooh, the leathers, ooh, the engines, ooh, this or that, well, some of those parts are mass-produced, and when you're not selling those super expensive luxury cars in a year like 2020, you lose revenue. And Mercedes hasn't been 100%, normal in terms of car sales this year. So it made sense from their end that they would ask Lewis to take a smaller salary. But to a driver, and quite logically, this would seem like an insult. What he's saying, or what he's thinking, Lewis Hamilton, is that, alright, Mercedes, you value me $8 million less this year, even though I won another championship, I beat more records, I won more races, and I'm valued less now? Like, what's that all about? And I can sort of see where he's coming from. And there's actually another person who I certainly respect in the motorsport world. His name is Adrian Newey, and he had the same problem. He was at McLaren, and his salary was getting cut, and he said to Ron Dennis and said, so you value me X million pounds less. I'm not going to say the exact number, it's not really out there for me to say, so I'm not going to say that. But, of course, he was indignant. He's the greatest designer of all time, and he's getting paid less than a previous year, even though he had brought heightened sponsorship and even more money to the team. And what happened was he looked elsewhere to get McLaren's interest back in him, and it worked. You know what? Because McLaren went and re-signed Adrian for another couple of years, and although Ron Dennis wasn't happy about it, he'd signed him, and although they didn't win another championship together, Adrian would go on and win 4 Constructors' Championships and 4 Drivers' Championships with Red Bull. So it just shows how valuable he is, and it's the same situation with Lewis Hamilton. So I believe that is why Lewis Hamilton feels insulted, and I believe that is why he can command such a high paycheck. Now, going back to our previous timeline, where are we on that? Well, we're right at the point right now where Lewis Hamilton has said no, he's not going to take his 40 million British pound contract offer. He's not going to do that. And that has been noted, that's come out to the world. I don't think Mercedes are very happy that has been leaked, but somewhere inside the team, somebody's been leaking that, his contract information, and that sort of a thing. So, what are Mercedes' options? Well, their first and most obvious one is to increase his proposed salary by 10 million British pounds, what he wants. But their next option is quite drastic. So, right now, in Williams is George Russell. And although he has a contract with Williams, right? Remember this. And Williams are notoriously hard to get a driver out of a contract with. There is a way to get him out of his Williams contract. Now, it would be very costly for Mercedes. It would cost them, in my estimations, about 10 million British pounds based off of previous encounters with Williams drivers and their paychecks. But for a team like Mercedes, and the fact that they'd be getting out of a massive doozy of a paycheck for Lewis Hamilton, $10 million is the amount of money that he wants them to raise his contract by, don't you forget that. It wouldn't really be a problem, and I think they'd be more than willing to raise George Russell's salary from $500,000 a year up to $5 million or maybe even $10 million. I think they'd be willing to do that. Now, from Lewis Hamilton's angle, he can't do too much. His first thing he can do is lower his offer, but that means that he's giving in to the Mercedes pressure, and what that will mean is Mercedes will then negotiate him even lower on the paycheck, which is just going to be disastrous for him. I think the lowest he can logically go is back to his 2019 and 2020 salary, which is 48 million British pounds. So, the other option for him is to threaten Mercedes and say he's going to another team. Now, knowing Lewis Hamilton, he can win a race, by my estimations, next year in the Red Bull, the McLaren, the Alpine, and maybe even Ferrari. So, he can use that to his advantage, say, although I may not be a championship threat, I can go to any of these teams, and I can win races next year. And he won't be lying. And that is probably a scary proposition for Mercedes, knowing that other teams are working up and trying to beat them for the 2022 regulation cycle, and knowing that they could have very strong cars, other teams, in those years, then I think Mercedes will try to keep him on at least until 2022 so that they can have a nailed-down championship for that season. Now, do I think Mercedes will win the 2022 World Championship? No, I don't. But I do think they will, and I think they would like to keep Lewis Hamilton at the team for that reason, just in case it's a struggle in 2022. From George Russell's point of view, and yes, we are now in George Russell's point of view in the Williams, what can he do to get the Mercedes seat? So the first thing he's going to have to do is be very patient with Mercedes. They're an organization that does not jump into anything very quickly. Especially if we look back at other times that a driver retired late in the season. Remember Nico Rosberg in 2016? Remember what happened then? They didn't pick Pascal Wehrlein because A, he was being too pushy and aggressive with the negotiations, but B, they don't jump into anything. Hence why they didn't jump into using Pascal Wehrlein in 2017. They used Valtteri Bottas. He was more of a known quantity, whereas Wehrlein wasn't. And it's sort of the same issue with Russell. So he's going to have to be very careful, George Russell, and he's going to have to make sure that he doesn't get too pushy with the Mercedes management, especially Toto Wolff, who is apparently an excellent bargainer. Now, the other main thing he can do is do a test for Mercedes. Now, you may be wondering, well, technically F1, why would George Russell do a test for Mercedes? And the answer is strikingly simple. Let me explain. So if he did a test for Mercedes, he could use their 2019 car, and because it's 2021, he can drive around the Silverstone track in England. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, now wait a minute, what's so simple about that? Well, George Russell lives in England right now because of lockdown restrictions. So, he's very close to the track, he's very close to Mercedes. If he requests a test with them, which being a Mercedes junior driver, they can't really say no to, if he impresses with his times around the Great British Grand Prix track, then I think he could help his chances by getting into that Mercedes car. And that could really help him get into the other Mercedes car, the 2021 W12. I know, it feels like just last year they were saying the Mercedes W11, and it was, but it's going to be interesting to see how competitive the W12 is. For F1's sake, I hope it's not too good, and I hope Red Bull can be close throughout the course of the season. But then again, it's Mercedes. They've probably done something exceptional that none of us could have expected. Let's think about it. I mean, they could have strapped rocket boosters to the car. They could have put super aero or super glue tires that literally glue the car into the ground. They could do pretty much anything and still blow the field away next year. Now, for those wondering, what am I in favor of? What do I want Mercedes to do? Now, I personally would like them to drop Valtteri Bottas, grab George Russell, and keep Lewis Hamilton. I don't want Mercedes to pay Lewis Hamilton the $50 million. I want them to pay the $48 million, and I don't want them to back down from that argument, because that shows that Lewis Hamilton is so valuable that they're literally willing to hurt their brand and hurt the financial sheets so they can keep Lewis Hamilton. Now, although people will be saying, oh, that's harsh, it really isn't, because Valtteri Bottas isn't that good of a driver. And yes, I'm talking about Bottas now. I mean, he's a great driver, right? But he's not good enough to beat George Russell. We know that. We saw that at the Secure Grand Prix. Hence why I think Russell gets Bottas's place if I ran Mercedes. I don't run Mercedes, but honestly, sometimes I wish I did, simply just so I could make decisions like that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If you did enjoy today's video, leave a like, subscribe, hope you did enjoy. But if you didn't like today's video, explain why in the comments. This seems to dissuade people from disliking our videos. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.